Hello everyone and welcome to the Voice Science channel. My name is Sarah Lobigaiga de Rodriguez, your host, and today I'm so excited to welcome Smirna Romero. Smirna is a counsellor and psychologist who runs a project called Always Mind. Today we'll be talking about well-being, happiness and mental health strategies, and I'm so excited to hear what Smirna has to share with us. Hello Smirna and welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
It's a real honor to have you here today. Before we get started, I'd love to hear a little bit of a background about who you are, what you do, and what's brought you to where you're at the moment.
Yeah. So as you said, my name is Smirna and I'm from Venezuela. So this is in South America. I'm a psychologist. I studied psychology in Venezuela and then I did a master's degree in clinical psychology. I practiced for over 6 years back in my home country. And because of the situation in my country, which is not very good right now, I decided to migrate. So I moved to Australia about 5 years ago. And as most migrants, I started working in different areas. And because psychology is such a regulated profession here in Australia, I've been going through different processes. And I recently registered as a counselor a year ago and started practicing as a counselor, and then started this project in April this year. So it's very new. And yeah, just working on this right now.
Congratulations. You've been so busy and, knowing what goes behind all these achievements as an immigrant to Australia, you must have a really solid mindset and lots of motivation.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, fantastic. So Smirna, with all your studies, background and expertise as a psychologist and a counsellor, I think that you have some really profound messages and ideas to share with our audience. And that's exactly why I wanted to get you on today's podcast. So I'd be really interested in hearing from you what strategies you would suggest to build happiness for our listeners. So if someone's feeling a bit flat, we've been through such a tough year, especially in Melbourne. What would be your top takeaways to bolster and build up our personal happiness moving forward?
I think that over my experience, I would say that one of the most important things is to work on our self-knowledge. So this part of knowing who we are, what we like, what we don't like, our needs is so important to find that happiness. It's common that we find ourselves kind of on an automatic pilot, just doing what we think we need to do, working, regular daily tasks. And we don't take a time to sit down and ask ourselves, what do we need to do to feel happy? What do we love doing? What is our passion? So it all has to do with self-knowledge and just finding out who we are really in depth. I think that's one part of it, which is maybe a long process and you might need help for it, but it's something that you can start working on. Another thing would be to learn how to ask for help and support. So human beings, we are built to connect with people. We need to be able to talk about what we're going through. So sometimes when we're going through a difficult moment, we tend to isolate or to avoid a problem, or we tend to think that if we talk about the problem, it's going to get bigger. And it's actually the opposite. So we need to be able to talk about this. So finding that person that we trust, it can be a family member, it could be a friend, and knowing that we need to talk about it to be actually know how to handle it. And that, of course, will help us to feel happier. I think those are the two basic things that I would recommend.
Yeah, fantastic. Isn't it ironic, that this year when we've needed the most supports, I think, in place due to being isolated, it's actually been probably very challenging for everyone to focus on that need to interact.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's been so difficult. I think it's been, the socializing. We can see how important it is right now. And because we're isolated, in that sense, it has affected so much our mental health. And I think everyone has been affected by it. No one has been able to go through the situation without feeling bad in a certain moment, I think. So,
yes. Yeah. So at Voice Science, we advocate a lot for increasing communication comfort and confidence with our international clients. So individuals who come from a massive variety of language backgrounds, who have massive strength being bilingual. But I recently attended a workshop which was coordinated by the City of Melbourne as part of the International Students Connect and Learn series. And I was so delighted to attend your workshop and learn about a very new concept for me, which I actually wish I knew about when I was living abroad, and that being migrant grief. So I really actually have invited you on to share this knowledge with our listeners, because I think it's such a critical thing to know about if you're living abroad as an expatriate or even just going on a working holiday. So I'd really love to hear from you. What is migrant grief and how does this impact on our well-being when we live abroad?
Okay. So migrant grief is the elaboration process of all the losses associated to the whole migration experience. So this means that when we live abroad, even if we move to a different city in our own country, we have to face different losses. We have different losses and we have to have elaboration processes for each of those losses. And one thing that is important to say is that this is a process that everyone goes through in different degrees when they leave their homes. So it's not about being mental illness or a specific problem, but just understanding that it's a normal human process that you have to face when you migrate.
So is it like we all refer to the terms like culture shock and homesickness? So prior to knowing this term, I put everything down to being homesick and culture shock. But how does it kind of connect with reference to these words that I think are really in common use? We all sort of know those words.
Yeah, well, I would say that they are part of the migration grief. So, of course, when you feel homesick, it's because you're not being able to see what's familiar, to feel that comfort or those feelings of loneliness. And that's part of processing and adjusting to a new culture and a new country.
Right. So during the workshop, what I found really fascinating was how you were talking about the different ways individuals can experience migrant grief. So when I was living near Berlin, I had no offense to Germany, but I really struggled with the landscape and the view that I saw outside my window. The land was very flat. I was stuck in winter and it got this like really cloudy quality in the air. And it made me depressed. Like I felt so flat and I'd look out and be like, I just want to get out of here. So I know that you talked through different things and factors like the climate, the taste of the foods around you, the social interaction. Can you run us through a bit of a summary of what types of areas migrant grief hits us in?
Yes. Yeah. So of course, that's a pretty good example, what you just mentioned. And there's so many areas of our lives that we don't actually realize that can be affected until we migrate. So, for example, like you mentioned, the climate, the language. So even though you move, for example, to a country that speaks your same language, the accent, the type of jokes that they use, and it's also very difficult to feel integrated into that. Another thing could be the social reference group. So you're used to having your social group that supports you, you know that they're there, and then you find yourself lonely and having to establish new relationships the same way that you had back home. And it can be pretty difficult, and especially when you migrate as an adult. Another thing could be the social status. So a lot of people, when they migrate, they have to start again their career, their professional lives, and start off in maybe jobs that they wouldn't do in their home country. So it's facing a lot of difficulties, and it's understanding that it's an adjustment process to all of those areas in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's really, I guess what I'm hearing from what you're sharing with us is that if you move from your familiar environment, the environment you have strong history with, where your family is, where your language is, where your culture is, and you put yourself somewhere else, you will experience some forms of grief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Are there specific, so given that when we in a way displace ourselves, it's very interesting because I think when we pack our cases to go and study abroad, I did it, I was an international student, and you sit in the plane, and for me, I was always like, oh crap, I went a bit far, like what's waiting for me? I just want to get off the plane. So I make quick decisions and I roll with them. And then sitting in the seat, I would always be like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Where am I going? Yeah. And then I think that first night in the country abroad really hits you hard. You feel like very isolated, and there's a lack of knowledge of what's coming for you. But what is really interesting, though, I think, is that when we immigrate, we have all our dreams, we have hopes behind that. There's a very strong reason why we're going, and the reasons are usually positive, to get something better. So what happens to us when we arrive and then the grief hits?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. I think that we have very high expectations. A lot of people also migrate looking for a better quality of life. So you have this expectation that everything is going to be better than back home. And yes, you're going to find things that are better, but not everything is going to be better. Then you're going to lose other things. So you're having to find that balance between the good that you found and the good that you left behind. And I think that another thing that could happen in terms of what you're saying is that we tend to idealize the country that we're moving to. So of course, I'm planning all this, I'm spending all of this money, all of this energy to go to this place. It has to be perfect. And I want it to be perfect. And in that idealization process, we tend to then, in a way, diminish a bit our own culture and our own identity. And that maybe even in a subconscious way, we can affect our own self-esteem because it has to do with our identity. So that's something that we can face as well when we migrate.
Yeah. Smirna, this is really profound, and thank you so much for sharing that connection to self-esteem, because on a daily basis, I meet new clients who, when I assess them, I really want to establish, are you here because there's a really concrete barrier to your communication comfort that relates to communication need? Or are you here because your view of yourself and your identity has gotten in the way of your communication comfort, and it's very hard to split? And so for anyone tuning in, I think it's really important that if you're sitting here, watching and listening in to our conversation, that you notice that when you're communicating, your comfort is so affected by your identity. And it's not always about your proficiency as a speaker. This element of migration grief can actually really destabilize you. And I think this is why I'll often meet clients who, in their country of origin, were really good at public speaking, social butterflies, leaders, and never ever thought about fear to communicate. And then on arrival in Australia, everything has changed and they find themselves reserved, and they might feel like they lost all their ability to do public speaking. But I want to tell you, your identity, like your view of your identity might shift, but your skills, no matter what language you're in, they're still there. We don't lose that ability to speak in public, but our environment influences it a bit, don't you think?
Yes. And this is something that actually happened to me, I can say.
Right.
in my case, when I migrated to Australia, I already spoke English because I learned how to speak English when I was very young. I lived in the United States when I was 7 years old. And even though like I was coming here, the same thing, idealizing the whole situation, I'm thinking I'm going to do pretty well because I already speak the language. And then when I arrived here, I started feeling very insecure when I was applying for jobs, for example. And I kept asking myself why. I don't understand. I know I'm able to communicate what I need and they understand me. I understand what they're telling me, but I still found those insecurities inside of me. And it's when I understood it had to do with that not being in a place where I feel maybe supported or that they maybe understand my culture, or it goes beyond the language in a way. So yeah, it's pretty difficult. Yeah.
So for anyone listening in who may have heard this term now and, has formed an understanding about migrant grief, what kinds of symptoms can we look out for if we're experiencing migrant grief? Because I think it's really helpful to know it's not all about me not being good enough. There's something else going on that's a lot deeper than my skills and my proficiency. There's this thing called grief, and that manifests itself in my life in certain ways. So I think naming what is going on can be really helpful to affirm and empower ourselves. So what might we experience when we're going through it?
Yes, so there are many, many signs that you could have all of them or just a few. Of course, experiencing anxiety, irritability, sadness. And something that's very particular of migratory grief is that there's a permanent ambivalence. So it means that even in moments of happiness, like achieving a goal, you may feel sad at the same time because you're not with the people that you truly care about back home. So it's that mixture of feelings, constant mixture of feelings. There are, of course, physical symptoms like, for example, skin problems or stomach aches or headaches. One clear sign is the delay in certain life decisions. So, for example, maybe deciding to have children or to commit to a relationship or even professional growth. So because you don't know if you're staying, if you're going, you're even asking yourself, what I was doing back home, do I want to do this again now? And then you find yourself losing time, just keeping on with your daily activities and not taking the time to make these type of decisions. Another sign could be feeling stuck. Like, for example, some people have economic difficulties to go back home. They don't have, the financial stability to pay, for a ticket to go back home. And you can feel trapped where you're at. So, of course, you feel very frustrated because you can't do that. Another sign could be feelings of guilt. So, for example, for some people, like in my case, if you leave a country that it's not doing so well, you left your family behind, maybe your parents, you come here or to another country looking for a better quality of life. So when you are reaching your goals or you're doing well, even though you're happy, you might feel guilty because, your parents are still going through those difficult times. Another thing could be other physical symptoms, like, for example, your appetite being affected. Maybe you have lost your appetite or you're eating more than before. And of course, your body is adjusting to a different type of food, and it can affect you as well, pretty much in that sense. And I think that one of the most common ones is feeling lonely. So, as I said before, it's very difficult to start establishing new relationships and those meaningful ones that you need to have when you need support. So maybe you meet new people in a very social way and, just to go out to have a drink or to have a bite. But then when you're feeling sad, who do you talk to? So feeling lonely is one of the most common and difficult signs.
Do we ever get over migrant grief, or is there any hope?
Yes, there is. There are different theories that say that it takes around 5 years to finally adapt to a new country. And it, of course, it all has to do with what you do with that. And if you are willing to work on that elaboration process, to talk about what you're going through and to try and find solutions, because it's pretty easy to get stuck on what you miss. So, of course, there's hope, but it's also personal work.
Yes. Yeah. Are there any things that research show set you up for more success to managing and handling migrant grief? Because what I'm hearing is, I'm actually terrified of anyone who's listening who is thinking about leaving because it's all been too much. But just imagine if they're at the brink of a breakthrough. So what might set someone up to actually, after 4 years they've been here, they've hit a wall, they're in that ambivalence, like, should I go, should I stay? What actually would set someone up for success in their decisions for their future if they were to choose to roll with staying in that country that they've immigrated to?
Yeah, I think that one of the most helpful things that you can do is actually try to integrate to the culture. Learning and reading and participating in traditions, in events. Like, for example, here in Melbourne, there are so many things that happen over the year to learn about those events, what it means to their culture, why is it so important to participate. Because what happens is the most common thing is that people migrate and try to find the people from their same country there. And that's good. I think that's helpful because you have that support, you feel understood, but at the same time, you should work on integrating yourself to the culture and learning about it. And not only the language, things like slang, the food, it helps a lot, because if not, it's like you're living in your own little country in another place. And that isolation can feel more intense if you don't work on that.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's somehow I've just got this image of your logo in my head, like a little tree, that we're planting, and we've got to get those roots, like the deeper the roots go, but then also acknowledging that you've got another tree at home and that tree's still there because all the family and your support network and your mother tongue and your culture. And, I think it's almost like you've got to live between the two worlds and focus on the positives.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have this thing where I lived in so many different countries, and I know, this isn't a therapy session, but I lived in so many different countries that, some of the cities I lived in, like, for example, Sarajevo, I felt so integrated. It felt so comfortable for me. I was heartbroken to leave. And if I, look at my palm and I know the lines on my palm, I feel like I know the streets of that city. I can smell it. It's still part of me. What do we do when we leave and we never go back? Do we also have a grief from the places we immigrated to that we left behind because we made the decision to return home? I know of clients, that actually returned home, and that alone is also really challenging. So do we get a form of migrant grief if we return to our country of origin as well?
Yes, it's exactly like you, just exactly the same way as you explained it right now. We do experience migrant grief the same way when we leave, because again, we built so many things in that country, had so many experiences that we know we're not going to have anymore. We're not going to have them again. So we have to face that grief in the same way.
Yeah, that actually makes me feel quite emotional, because you've got, all those people that you leave behind, but how wonderful that we're in a world that's connected digitally. I think, imagine writing letters and putting them on a boat and 6 months later they arrive. We're better set up, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Smirna, this has been so fascinating. Yeah. Look, I think this has been something where I feel like if anyone is facing difficulties with their well-being and their comfort while living abroad, no matter where you're living, anywhere in the world, it's good to take a holistic view and to really consider the impact of migrant grief. So let's just say you're facing eating and nutrition disorders, to consider, is there something that's actually triggering all these things that feel like they're falling apart in my life? And if so, what kinds of supports do you recommend? I'm presuming that working through these issues with a counsellor or a psychologist who's really well informed about migrant grief is a really good way to go.
Yes, of course. One thing that I would suggest for everyone to do personally is work on their self-awareness. So it's basically just checking in every day. What am I feeling right now? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling happy? What am I being worried about in this moment? And try to understand what are those, because for everyone it's different. So just seeing what is it that is affecting you the most. And of course, lots of support. So even if you have your family back home, you can talk to them online and discuss what you're going through. But definitely talking to a counselor can be very helpful. And well, for certain, in talking about international students, they have, of course, their insurance, and some of them have the possibility of covering counseling services, so that it's something that they can have access to. And I think it's important for everyone to know that that's a possibility.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, to advocate for mental health, I'm usually telling clients, with your private health or, travel insurance, student insurance, it's really important to get these things in place to build a good foundation, maybe even just as something to check off as well, even if you're not sure if you're going through migrant grief that's affecting you to the degree that it could actually jeopardize your success in the country. I think it's really good to do due diligence with this, because we want to you're building up your studies, you're building up your language knowledge, you're building up your career path. Don't forget to build up your mind and your resilience and your psychological health. It's so important. Smirna, I've loved this conversation. I'm actually really sad to call it towards an end. And I really want to go for coffee with you, I have to say. But aside from that, Smirna, tell us about Always Mind. This is so exciting. You started it in April, and let us know, what is Always Mind and how can we learn more about what you do?
Yes. So, well, as I said, I started this project in April. I've always wanted to do this and to promote mental health awareness and to encourage people to work on their self-awareness and to work on the possibility of working with introspection to solve life problems, which we all have. So I started off with the idea of sharing information about mental health, but more from a very day-to-day basis kind of thing. So to try and see how we can work on our mental health every day. And of course, with that, is my counseling services. So it's an online service that I offer worldwide. So I have clients from different countries. I even have Venezuelan clients living in other countries. So I'm very fortunate to be able to do this.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And Smirna, you're bilingual. So do you offer services in Spanish as well as in English?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. So how can someone book an appointment with you if they're listening and they're like, I need Smirna in my life. I need some strategies.
Well, I have my website that you can contact me through there, through Instagram as well. If you click on the link in my bio, of course, you can book a session through that. And those are the two main ways to contact me.
And do people need a referral to see you?
No. So because, and this is a very long story that maybe I'm not going to extend to it too much right now, but because I'm a counselor, with counselors, you don't need a referral.
Fantastic.
So you can directly. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Smirna, it's been an absolute delight to speak with you today. Thank you so much for taking some time in your busy private practice counseling session, slot, and giving me a slot to share these really important tips and strategies and insights with our audience. I so appreciate the work that you're doing. So everyone listening in, I strongly encourage you to head across to alwaysmind.com.au and check out Smyrna's service. There's some wonderful ideas and quotes, and it's just so inspiring, even just the website alone. So make sure you head across there. I've linked it below for you. And Smyrna, in wrapping up, is there any final words you'd like to share to encourage our listeners?
Yes, I would say that because we were talking about migrant grief, working on our patients, understanding that this is a process that takes time, and knowing that everyone goes through this, we all go through difficult moments, and we have to be less scared of asking for help and support. So there are a lot of people out there who want help, like me, for example. So knowing that you're not alone. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. And
thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful day. Hasta luego.
Thank you.
Ciao.